Hey everybody, Mike and Tim here. Post July 4th, Tim had a big family vacation in Southern California. Hit the Disney.
Hit the Disney.
Right? You did Disneyland?
Yep.
How was that?
It was amazing. 2 days at Disney and 1 day at California Adventure.
And it was amazing?
It really was.
Okay, just for the record, if you're new to the podcast, Tim Stafford doesn't show like big emotions necessarily. So for him to use the word amazing
It was really
to
fun.
describe Disneyland,
It was crowded, it was warm, and we had a blast. Our littlest, Mazzy, was literally like, I don't know, like a quarter of an inch taller than the "you can't ride this ride" sign for like the roller coasters. So she got to
man, she
ride.
was so in.
Oh man, it was pretty fun.
yeah, okay. When you go with your kids and your kids are loving life.
Oh yeah, I don't know
that
if I would
makes
have
it
done
fun.
2 days at Disney just as an adult.
Yeah.
But with the kids, it was a lot of fun. And that the big Star Wars ride,
I know.
that ride's insane.
Okay, you told me. I'm on it.
Can't believe it. I was just so
Dang,
surprised.
bro.
The whole Star Wars land, I hadn't been able to see it yet, and I could live there.
Our friend Jana, who I know from way back, wrote in and said, I have a song on my running playlist that makes me think of Tim, and I wonder if anyone else has ever mentioned it. At the end of Tom Petty's Running Down a Dream, which is a great song, he makes this lazy announcement about turning the record over. It used to annoy me, but then Tim's thank you was added to the end of your podcast. I find myself smiling and praying for you all. Anyhow, keep up the great work. So,
I like that.
yep. I mean, and you have some Tom Petty vibes.
Oh yeah, I love Tom Petty. I think Tom Petty is like our Beatles. Hot takes.
That's a very strong statement.
I know.
After Disneyland, you went to Big Bear.
Yep.
And what was that like? Big Bear Lake? Big Bear Village?
Yeah, some of our best friends are born and raised in Big Bear, and they moved to Auburn with us when we
Hold
moved
on a
up here.
second. I must have lost that invitation.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's in my spam folder.
You know, when it came back, it bounced back. Weirdly, though, it said return to sender, so I'm not sure what message you're sending.
Oh, come on now. So did you guys go out in the lake? I mean, what is Big Bear like 4th of July?
It's nuts. We've actually, when we lived in Southern California, we went up there all the time, and our band used to play there on 4th. So it was a lot of fun. It's really crowded, but their parents are living in a house that's on the lake that they inherited.
Oh.
And so we were just in the house, and we rented a pontoon boat one day and spent the whole day on the lake. The water is frigid.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it's complicated now. Ever since the previous president and the way in which the flag was used, I have very mixed emotions when I see the American flag, and they're not entirely positive. So this was an interesting 4th where I was kind of wrestling with that, and they have a lot of T-shirt shops and stuff up there that sell shirts that have like the United States on them and say like "F off, we're full," and just like this really angry American. And I was like asking my friend, I was like, why do you think that patriotism has become so tied to like hate and anger? Because it used to be kind of like, this was the land of the free, the home of the brave. This is where you can come for the American dream, and anyone can achieve anything here, no matter where you're from. And now it's just like these really angry, hateful shirts and stickers and flags, and just, I don't know. So the holiday in general is kind of a mixed bag, but
yeah,
family time is fun.
Oh, I love it. Good for you, man. And you're super chipper today. I can feel it.
Heck yeah. I'm ready to take on the world. Hey world, check me out.
Oh, let's talk about therapy.
Let's talk about therapy.
Two middle-aged white men going to therapy. So therapy is absolutely kicking my ASS all over the place. I don't know, man. I know you have to be at a certain place to receive the gift of therapy, but I wish I would have known some of this sooner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You and your lovely bride are together.
Mm-hmm.
And is it me, or does the therapist seem to be focusing a lot on you?
No,
And
she's
she's an equal.
yeah. I didn't realize how bad some of my previous therapists were that I would try out until I've had her. She's just remarkable. Like
I love
it's
that.
so good, and she's just cutting
So
to the
good.
core for both of us on years and years and I mean, just untouched stuff from 40 years of life that
Yeah.
has never been dealt with or even talked about in certain ways because she knows what she's doing and we don't. But
True.
just
What's one insight about yourself that you have gleaned? If there's one that comes to mind. If not, because it's all big, hairy,
one
tangle
of the
in there.
biggest things is she's been picking at like it came from first how no one has really known or seen me as I am as a creative and encouraged that. It's always been like a addendum or like an ornament that people would see or comment on, but not as an intrinsic piece of me. She has seen that. She first started working through the fact that has been not acknowledged, but like appreciated or maybe unacknowledged in me by other people. But also now she's been working into like, I don't even know myself anymore. I don't see myself and what that looks like and what are the things to work through. And so that stuff's been really interesting for me because as a 4, you normally don't.
Enneagram.
Yeah.
4.
You don't normally like being seen or like,
Yeah.
detailed or understood in that way. But she just said some things that kind of put me on my heels. And I had to like go to the car and just sit and think about for the drive home.
Oof. Oh man.
Which is hard, but very, very good.
Yeah.
And very encouraging to feel like this person just kind of looks right into you and is like, this is who you are. I see you. And you're like, wow.
Yeah. The Eye of Sauron,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps. Yeah, that is rough.
One does not simply walk into mental health.
Yeah. That's good.
What about you?
That's good. I was hoping you wouldn't ask. So the mode of therapy is designed to get in touch with emotions and what's happening in your body.
Yeah.
My whole life has been spent sort of in my brain, in my head, and the only thing I was told about what you do with your bodies is don't.
Right.
So it's been interesting to go into desire, disappointment, pain. Like we start every session, he'll be like, "So what do you want today?" And I don't know, and the question drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Like I get angry
Yeah.
because I'm like, I don't know.
That's why
that's
you're
your
here.
job. Yeah, you tell me. And he just won't. And it's all about, well, what do you want? What do you? And I don't know. It's that same like there's this whole cavern of stuff I've just never been in touch with.
Yeah.
But it's been in touch with me because it's been driving so much behavior. And so he has this kind of shorthand way of talking about how we use, different coping mechanisms. And he's like, the point of all the coping mechanisms are either to try to fill the hole or to not feel the hole.
Ooh.
And that fill it or not feel it line has had great explanatory power.
Stuff to fill the hole or to not feel the hole.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he was like anger.
Yeah.
Anger, so let's say you're lonely. And which is easier, to be in touch with your loneliness and feel responsible for what you do in your loneliness, or to be angry at somebody else because you're lonely?
Totally.
Right? And then all of that gets packed into a relationship with God. And this is where I've been like, oh my goodness, like all of this stuff that I do to either fill the hole of God's, distance, or to not feel the whole of God's distance. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like like we were raised to believe that you're just supposed to feel close to God all the time.
Yes. It's been very damaging.
Yeah. Yes, totally. So anyway, I mean, it's awful. It's horrible, Tim.
And you should all do it.
Oh, only when you're ready. Because my goodness. Anyway, I just thought we'd do a quick segment called Two Middle-Aged White Guys in Therapy. So
I like it.
Because one of my favorite memes just floating around, the interwebs is, dudes would rather go explore the Titanic in a crappy submarine than go to therapy. Yeah. Like whatever. Dudes would rather X, Y, and Z than go to therapy.
What was Gombas's thing? The billboard is like 90% of men die from stubbornness or something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, there you go. That's a new segment. Anyway, we're glad you're with us. Hello, Voxology community. It's so funny, bro. I actually forget that we're recording sometimes.
Me too.
And I wonder if people are like, let's fast forward this part. We got some great feedback on social media that doggone it has said it's actually worth engaging some nonsense out there. So thank you. I also want to say thank you to, I need to be more regular about this, but
need more fiber.
Some folks. Yeah, dude, I need to Metamucil this, bro. Lydia and Clint and Amy and Andrew and Elizabeth and Aaron and Julie and Bob and Brody.
Wow.
Thank you all for supporting us through Patreon. And there's a whole community that also supports us through tithe.ly. But again, I know, but it's such an encouragement when you're doing work and people see value in it.
Yeah.
And so thank you for your generosity, and thank you for allowing us to do, like, we had a Patreon dinner in Southern California. We did this non-ference, we're going to call it. Instead of conference, it was a non-ference. Like, things like this are like allow us to do different stuff. And so thank you very much, all of you. We're going to dive back into Revelation. Post-Gombas hangover. So great.
Post-powers and principalities.
Yes. Well, I mean, boom. So we're looking at the seven churches, or the seven oracles to the churches is actually how we should understand that. And we're making the case that what gets said in these oracles is what gets worked out in the rest of the letter. So what our dispensationalist friends sometimes do is they separate the letters from the rest of the book. The letters were past and the rest of the book is future. And that is a complete, not a complete, I'm exaggerating. That is a failure of hermeneutics, I would say, because what you get this picture of Christ in chapter 1, and that gets filtered in to the churches, and then you get all of these promises to the churches that get worked out in the rest of the book. And certainly some would be considered future, but remember, we're not operating on a linear timeline in Revelation. We're doing something completely different. And if that's new, go back and listen to the 87 episodes we did on the background of the book. Hallelujah. So we're going to look at two churches today, and they share something in common, and that's why I'm grouping them together. To the angel of the church in Pergamum. Now, these were 7 real churches in Asia Minor. We know there are more than 7 because 2 others are referenced in the New Testament, at least. So we know the 7 is symbolic. So the fact that the number 7 is symbolic doesn't mean that these weren't real flesh and blood churches, and they were. And so Jesus stands among them, and these are very stylized words he's giving these churches. They're stylized, according to one theologian, in the pattern of imperial edicts, but they all follow a similar pattern, so on, so on, so on. So We met the church in Ephesus. Now, the only city that kind of had more sway than Ephesus was Pergamum. These are the words of him who has the sharp, double-edged sword. Now, the double-edged sword is a picture that comes from Isaiah 11 and Isaiah 49. And we're going to encounter in this letter and the next, like, violent imagery. The thing that Revelation, that is so confusing, but it makes sense when we get there, is that Revelation uses holy war, violent language held next to the war that is fought by the Lamb who was slain. And so on the one hand, you have swords and riders on white horses, but the robe is dipped in blood. And as we'll see, the blood was on Jesus before the battle started. So it's his own blood. So it's the slain lamb. So the lamb conquers and wins the war by being martyred. And the army that accompanies the lamb is the martyred people. And so it just messes with all of the holy war imagery that's used. So it subverts it. So a double-edged sword is going to be important here in a second, but it's an Old Testament image that's reintroduced here. So he says, these are the words of him who has this sharp double-edged sword. I know where you live, Pergamum, where Satan has his throne. Oh, now, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about Satan's throne, because there are some people that think it's a reference to the synagogue in Pergamum. And one of the things we have to realize is that when Paul and the apostles went out preaching the gospel, they went first to synagogues. So they would preach to Jews, and those Jews who said yes to Jesus would then form churches. So any place like in Ephesus where there was a large Jewish population, you would often have several house churches in the area. The Jews, not the Jews generally, but in a lot of places, there was animosity between the Jews that had accepted Jesus as Messiah and the Jews who did not. And one of the occasions for the animosity was that the Jews who'd accepted Jesus as Messiah were now fellowshipping with Gentiles who'd accepted Jesus as Messiah. So it's not surprising that in the cities of Asia Minor, where there were large Jewish populations, there was tension between the Jesus-following Jewish people and the non-Jesus-following Jewish people. And so some think, some of the references, like we'll read about a synagogue of Satan, which is the idea that the Jews were now beginning to differentiate themselves from the Jesus followers in a way that gave Rome the opportunity to persecute them. Because as long as Christianity, fledgling Christianity, was considered a subset of Judaism, they were safe from certain things. But now there seemed to be, at least in the letter, some hints that the local Jewish synagogues were beginning to say, these guys aren't with us. Right. And that then opened the Christians up to different kinds of persecution. So some think that the Satan has his throne is a reference to Jewish animosity in the region. I do not think that is at all what is being referenced here, because when you go back and study ancient Pergamum, they had a massive acropolis that dominated the city. And at the top of that acropolis was a humongous altar to Zeus in the shape of a throne. And inscribed, into the throne were words like Savior. And not only that, but there was like Aphrodite was there, and Dionysius, like this. There was this whole like massive dominating hillside full of idols to pagan gods. And so I'm with a lot of scholars that think that the throne, because he uses where Satan has his throne, is a reference to the throne shape of this humongous altar of Zeus, or to a reference to the fact that all the pagan deities, including the emperor, were worshipped in this one big acropolis area. Yeah. So and when John, when Jesus through John says, hey, I want you to understand that behind these idols sit this Satan figure. Like that is, we hear that 2,000 years later and we're like, yeah, Satan, blah, 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 blah. But that was a way that Revelation functions to kind of unmask what we thought was beautiful and lovely and secure and provided stability, right? The fortune of the gods was actually blasphemous and demonic. And so, like, this isn't just a rhetorical device that John's using. Hey, this is where Satan has his throne. But he's also serving an apocalyptic function and unmasking what's sitting behind the Greco-Roman pantheon.
So is that kind of like with the powers and principalities from last week?
Yes,
these things that were influencing, not just running around with pitchforks, and they were doing something that looked like it was good, but it was steering in a way that was not.
Yes, I don't know that the Gentiles would have had a very sophisticated view,
right,
of what Gambus was articulating. It would have been news to them that the gods don't live in temples made by human hands, and they're not served by human hands as if they needed anything, right? That's Paul's speech in Acts 17. It would have been news to them that sitting behind the worship of these so-called gods and the worship of the emperor was actually a very dark power that stood opposed to God's purposes in the world. So I don't know how much beyond that they would have been able to articulate. We know when Paul is dealing with meat sacrificed to idols in Corinth, one of the things that the people who are eating the meat sacrificed to idols keep saying is, hey, we know that idols aren't anything at all. Mm-hmm. And that there's only one God. And Paul actually kind of chastens them in some ways that will become relevant in a bit. So where Satan has his throne is kind of where we left off. Yet, you, church, remain true to my name. You did not renounce your faith in me, not even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who was put to death in your city where Satan lives. So Antipas, the Greek here reads as if it were this death sentence were carried out in a legal setting. The idea that my faithful witness, that's used in Revelation to describe Jesus's guilty verdict in front of the pagan courts. He was put to death in your city. He did not renounce your faith in me. Like, all of that seems to indicate this was some sort of legal proceeding. And what Jesus sees in Antipas is the future of what's coming. In the next 100 years, that's going to be much more common. So even when he was martyred, you did not renounce your faith in me.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I have a few things against you. There are some of you among you who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who taught Balak to entice the Israelites to sin, so they ate what, Timothy?
I'm not there yet.
Oh, okay. Food sacrificed to idols, and they committed sexual immorality. Now, the joining of food sacrificed to idols and committing sexual immorality, that's going to be true of Balaam, this Balaam figure, the Nicolaitans that we met in Ephesus, and a Jezebel figure in the next letter. All right? So the two things that are repeated over and over and over in the churches that have compromised are that they're eating meat sacrificed to idols and they're committing porneia, or fornication, or sexual immorality. And as we'll see, the big debate is that literal, or is that channeling the fact that the Old Testament often uses sexual immorality as a figure or symbol of spiritual immorality? Mm-hmm. You know, that they'll use a physical affair to symbolize a spiritual affair. But the thing that I want to just draw attention to is this is the first of two Old Testament examples, this is from Numbers, of someone who tempts the Israelites to worship the false god Baal, the fertility god, and that led them to eat meat sacrificed to idols and to sexual immorality. All right? Now, likewise, you also have those who hold to the teaching of the Nicolaitans, and we met the Nicolaitans in Ephesus. The Nicolaitans, there are 3 different origin stories for the Nicolaitans. There's an ancient church father that says they were connected with a man named Nicholas from Acts 6. There's another view that looks at Nicolaitan and sees the Greek Nike part of that when we talked about victory and overcoming. The Nicolaitans were trying to overcome the Church of Jesus with their false teaching. And then there's a third view that, what was the third view? I had it. Dadgummit. I got to find it. Third view.
So I really shouldn't wear Nikes at this point because it's advocating for overthrowing Jesus.
Absolutely.
Reeboks
Nicolaitan is a transliteration of an Aramaic word that means let us eat. And so the Nicolaitans were people who advocated eating meat sacrificed to idols.
Literally. It's a
Yeah. So we just meet Balaam, an Old Testament figure. So what John is doing, which is in the prophetic tradition, of course, is taking someone who is notoriously, evil and leading God's people into immorality, and then using that like picture to describe the influence of these other groups.
Totally.
So here we meet Balaam and Balak, and you can read end of Numbers about that. Likewise, you also hold to the teaching of the Nicolaitans. You have people there who do that. Repent, therefore. Remember, the churches are called to repent corporately. Yeah. It's not just a bunch of individuals being sorry for their sin. It's like the church is to change direction. Otherwise, I will soon come to you and will fight against them, those false teachers, with the sword of my mouth. Now, again, the sword of my mouth lets us know that this is metaphorical language. But it's interesting when the sword is used in those number stories as punishment for those who assimilate to Baal worship because of Balaam and Balak. And so there is a callback there. It's not random that sword is mentioned twice and Balaam is mentioned, because if you go back and read that whole episode, the sword was used to kind of punish the people that were idolatrous. Then he says, whoever has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. This is straight from the mouth of Jesus in the Gospels. To the one who is victorious. And remember, victorious is the one who conquers, and conquering in Revelation is much different than conquering the way the Romans taught. I will give some of the hidden manna. There is an apocryphal story in, 2nd or 3rd Maccabees, where the city of Jerusalem was about ready to fall, and the Ark of the Covenant is taken away before Indiana Jones finds it.
Right.
And
don't even talk about that.
And it's hidden. And one of the things that we know from earlier in the story is that manna, the last remaining manna, was put into the ark. And so hidden manna seems maybe to be a reference to that apocryphal story, that the covenant of God will be renewed in a very dramatic sort of way, and everything will be uncovered and brought back. So perhaps. So remember, I commend you for this. Then he says, I have this against you. To the one who overcomes, the one who resists these forces of assimilation, he says, I will give some of the hidden manna. I will also give that person a white stone. Now, a white stone here had significance. White in the Roman Empire was a very powerful symbolic color of purity or righteousness. A stone, and I only read this in one scholar's take, so I don't know how true it is. I like to see 3 or 4 different scholars reference something, but he was talking about how in the Roman Empire at that time you could be black stoned, which means it would be a negative mark against your reputation. Similar, and forgive the euphemism here, but being blackballed.
Right.
So a white stone would be an indication of favor, whereas a black stone was an indication of disfavor. And that stone you would get hidden manna, a stone, and there would be a new name written on it. And that seems to be a reference to the Isaiah passage of Yahweh's
So there's like an idea of, the connotation with manna, just with provision and secret provision or secret gifts or secret.
Good question. I don't know. The interplay between eating the food sacrificed to idols versus eating the hidden manna could be what's at play here. I don't know.
So that, and then what was the second one?
So there was hidden manna, a white stone, and a new name written.
The white stone meaning glory, because the black stone was a mark against you. So this was a mark
more like vindication or favor.
Okay.
And the new name, I think, is a reference to the name above every name that that Philippians passage quotes. Oh, what was it? Dang, I'm slipping. I think it was a Jeremiah text that talked about the name above every name that was given to Yahweh, now is given to this Jesus. But anyway, so that's the church in Pergamum. The church in Pergamum, they'd resisted assimilation in the days of the martyr, but now some among them were following the teachings of this Old Testament figure who was, in a very different way saying we should, capitulate to the culture around us, and the Nicolaitans. All right. Now we meet a new false teacher. This is to the angel of the church of Thyatira. Write. These are the words of the Son of God. This is from Daniel, whose eyes are like blazing fire and whose feet are like burnished bronze. That's all Daniel stuff that we met in chapter 1. Yeah. I know your deeds. And again, it's always interesting. He's not saying I know your beliefs or your creedal statements. He's always saying I know what you do. I know your deeds, your love and your faith, your service and perseverance, and that you are now doing more than you did at first. Now remember, this is the opposite of what Jesus said to the Ephesians, who said, I wish you would do what you did at first now, but you haven't. To this church, he says, you're actually doing more than you did at first. Nevertheless, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophet. Now, Jezebel, of course, very famously is the wife of the wicked king Ahab in the Old Testament, who leads the people of Israel to the worship of the false god Baal, and eating meat and sexual immorality are the characteristics of that. It's interesting. She calls herself a prophet. Now notice, he doesn't object to her being a female in the role of a prophet, because they had female prophets. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that she is a false prophet that's at issue. It's not that she's a woman prophet. These are little subtle hints of how widely women were gifted and kind of seen in the early church. Nevertheless, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel. Now, her name wasn't Jezebel in the same way that the false teachers weren't named, Balaam in the previous letter. These are Old Testament types of immorality that are, being channeled. She calls herself a prophet. By her teaching, she misleads my servants into what? Sexual morality and eating food sacrificed to idols. Right? Do you see a theme?
This is bad.
Do you see a theme? Right? 3 times the Nicolaitans, Balaam, and now Jezebel. And it's this issue. And again, food sacrificed to idols could literally lead to porneia, which is the fornication with temple prostitutes, or at these dinner parties or guild parties, there was a lot of immorality that would go on there too. Or it could also just be in a general reference to committing adultery with a false god, like worshiping a false god. So I tend to think it's both, because particularly in the Balaam story, the Israelite, once they worshipped Baal, they took wives that were outside of Israel, and the Midianite wives, and had unsanctioned union with them. So all that is to say, she misleads my servants into sexual morality and eating food sacrificed to idols. I have given her time to repent, but she is unwilling. So I will cast her on a bed of suffering, and I will make those who commit adultery with her suffer intensely. Now, here we know that committing adultery isn't literally committing adultery. It's the spiritual adultery that we're talking about. So not only she will suffer, but those who participate in the idolatry will suffer intensely until they repent of her ways. I will strike her children dead. Now, her children isn't her literal children, but it's a reference to her followers. I will strike them dead. It's interesting here because there is a bit of hyperbole at play, because he literally just said, I will cause them to suffer until they repent. And striking dead, I'm not sure that means like unable to repent anymore. I think we're talking hyperbolically about like war language, the same, like the sword thing, same thing. This is a pattern in Revelation that we're going to see. There's lots of holy war language that is then executed by a slain lamb. So that's because we get like, we will strike her children dead. I think he's saying doom awaits her and her followers. Then all the churches will know that I am he who searches hearts and minds. In other words, I'm not going to let the church be infected by all of this. I will repay each of you according to your deeds. Man, this is so all over Revelation, and it really makes Protestants uncomfortable who say that all you have to do is accept Jesus into your heart, and then you're good. There are judgments all over the place about our deeds. So we just have to kind of broaden, as we have in previous episodes, our understanding of what it means to kind of believe. Now I say to the rest of you, to you who do not hold to her teaching and have not learned Satan's so-called deep secrets, I will not impose any other burden on you except to hold on to what you have until I come. So, in other words, there is this prominent false prophet. Her devotees, and they will, and again, the suffering, I don't know if that just means I will oppose them or literally I will cast them on a bed of suffering. I'm not sure. But to the rest of you, I have nothing else to say except stay true, just to hold on. To the one who is victorious and does my will to the end, I will give authority over the nations. Now, this is from Psalm chapter 2. That one will rule them with an iron scepter and will dash them to pieces like pottery. That is a messianic psalm that talks about giving the Son of Man, or in that case, it's literally the Son of God, authority to rule over the nations. So the idea is you will be enthroned with the Son of God over the nations, just as I have received authority from my Father. I will also give that one the morning star. Now, the morning star in Roman cosmology is Venus. Okay. And Venus was a deity who played who had a great deal of importance in the Caesar cult. Not all of the imperial lines and descendants used Venus, but Julius did, and there was a cult to Julius in Roma at the city, I believe. And the idea that I will give you the morning star is just another way of saying Caesar doesn't hold one. Mm. Caesar doesn't have one. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, here's just a shot. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Now, is this making sense?
Yeah.
Or is this way too choppy?
Far?
Okay. All right, I got more. So, Balaam incited Midianite women to lure Israelites into the worship of Baal, and that's in Numbers 25 and 31. Jezebel, the wife of King Ahab, was instrumental in turning Israel to Baal worship, 1 Kings 16. And the Nicolaitans, as we've seen, our best understanding of them is that they tempted Israel into the same thing. Now, let's talk about meat sacrificed to idols for a second.
Let's.
Odds are that, let's take Jezebel teaching about meat sacrificed to idols. Odds are these people weren't being spiritually faithless, but they were just being very practical. And because one of the ways to participate in the economy of Asia Minor is that you would be a part of guilds or trade associations, similar to labor unions. But these were far more important in ancient culture because there weren't protections for workers except through guilds. And there were, as you would imagine, all sorts of abuses to this system. But by and large, they served a very important economic function. And what you would do at guild meetings, evidently, is that you would sacrifice meat and offer it to whatever the god was or the gods of your guild or association. And then the rest of the meat, you would give a portion of it to the idol. And the rest of the meat would then be given out and shared as a common meal. And then sometimes those association meetings got a little wild, and you would bring in dancers, and inappropriate things would follow. So eating idol meat was tempting for people whose vocations were, and these were people who would be middle class and lower.
Yeah.
Whose vocations depended upon guild associations for employment. And so, well, of course, why wouldn't you go? Because we all know that's not real. So why wouldn't you just go and cross your fingers behind your back and eat some of this meat and do whatever the trade associations do? Because that's how you participated economically. That was like your job and your livelihood. Maybe not for everybody, but certainly at public festivals, public celebrations. I mean, so much of the worship of these gods was tied to the health of the city of which you were a part. You kept the gods happy and they blessed your city. And so it'd be like somebody, like being at a 4th of July party dressed in all black, turning their back on fireworks displays and talking crap about America all day. You would just look at that person and be like, hey, what's up? But even more so back then, because they would be risking offending the gods if they were not participating into this. So there was tons of social pressure to just play along. And evidently the Jezebel figure, the Balaam figure, and the Nicolaitans were all saying, hey, this really isn't, in some way, shape, or form, this really isn't a huge deal.
Yeah.
And maybe Jezebel was just being practical, like, dang,
well, it's
guys.
Like echoes of the garden with like hey, it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. Like you're just kind of opening up to some broader things. And
right. And here you are. You don't know that Christianity is true.
Right.
Right? I mean, maybe you heard from an apostle or the disciple of an apostle. You had an experience where the Holy Spirit filled you and enabled you with some empowerment that now, and you would gather together with 12 or 15 other people. And maybe there would be 1 or 2 people there of high status and reputation or wealth, but the rest of you were just sort of the common. Many of you would be slaves or a part of households where you had no power. You were, every way, shape, and form, marginalized. The Jews, if you were Jewish, the synagogue you came from would not welcome you any longer.
Right.
And you still carried whatever stigmas the Gentiles had of you as somebody who was Jewish. If you were coming from Gentile perspectives, you still weren't sure if you had to become Jewish first. You're all sitting at the outskirts of the most powerful civilization and the most prosperous civilization that has ever hit the planet. And it makes total sense that you would sit there and go, okay, we've given our lives to Jesus. We have our love feasts here. What's wrong with having a feast in honor of Zeus?
Right.
Right? Particularly when the trade associations and the public and civil ceremonies, I mean, all of those things fostered good business and relationship with the rest of the city.
The reverberations seem positive. You're not seeing like
absolutely
all of your livestock killed by, disease or something.
Yeah. Right. And we've said I think every episode so far about the churches, it's not that the Christians worship Jesus is that they worship Jesus alone,
Right.
And used language that was only appropriate for the emperor and applied that to Jesus. That was the issue.
No wonder they didn't like him.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And we have no way to relate to what it must have been like to be on the absolute margins of this. I mean,
like violently
like,
so.
What's that?
Like violently so. Just like,
yes, they were completely vulnerable. None of the strictures of Roman society were there for them once they said yes to Jesus publicly. That's why the church, they keep telling us about the early church. They fed each other.
Yeah.
They gave money to each other. They raised income for other places where it was poor because there was literally nobody else to take care of them.
Yep.
Right? I mean, so in that environment where particularly as we look at Domitian in a couple of episodes, where Roman, the imperial cult was like approaching its zenith in terms of power and influence and audacity. And you're in this marginalized sect and terrified to go public. My Lord, I mean, it would make total sense that you would want to go as far as possible into Roman culture and say yes.
Yeah. It's self-preservation.
Yeah. Now, I want to paint it that dramatically because, I mean, the natural questions that are on our horizon are, well, what is eating meat sacrificed to idols in Pornea today?
Yeah, right.
Because that's the role that Revelation plays. Is it forces us to do two things. It forces us to unmask the propaganda and illusion of our day, and then to ask, where are we participating?
Yeah.
In ways that just make life easier, but are actually betraying our identity as this body of Jesus.
Yeah, that's big.
That is absolutely big.
Well, because it requires work, whereas as you've established, this whole thing, this book has been taken out of context because it's easier to read it literally and just be like, hey guys, bad news.
Yeah.
This is
there's no curiosity. Listen, the rapture's going to come. You're either part of it or you're not. And the good guys, I mean, you don't have to discern anything in culture. Culture is bad. And so I want us to have lots of sympathy for these early Christians and to say, I don't know, maybe this Jezebel figure was totally wicked. Or maybe Jezebel was just practical. And I don't know, but I can certainly understand the temptation to have said yes to eating meat sacrificed to idols and whatever the sexual immorality is here,
right?
Whether it was literal or not.
Man, we used to work with this missionary in Guatemala, and every time she would come visit here, she was always like, I don't know how you guys can be Christians in this country. Like, everything is so easy, and there's so much distractions, and there's so much like just ease built into the society. And she's like, we are like clinging to Jesus to try to live.
Yep.
And so it's interesting when you think about that, because we are creatures of comfort and acceptance. You know, it's a human trait to want to be accepted and loved and seen and part and not ostracized. So it is. You want to have a lot of sympathy because we're not. No matter how we spin it these days, we're so targeted and we're so afflicted, and which we're not. To read that onto this with no discernment, we immediately were just like, yeah, totally, man. We're in the same boat.
It's because idolatry is so, I think in some ways more subtle.
Here?
I mean, we're not,
Yeah, totally.
And that's what your missionary friend is commenting on. Like, it's suffocating. So what I want to do is I want to say, okay, look what Jesus is doing with the churches. Now, again, it's very stylized. But he's looking at the churches and he's evaluating them by their assimilation levels. We're going to meet a church in a couple of episodes that is poor, and Jesus' word to them is, "Yet you are rich." And then we're going to meet a church that is rich, and his word to them is, I'm knocking at the freaking door and you better let me in because I'm not in there right now. Like, whoa. So the idols then and the idols now are the same.
Yeah.
Money, sex, and power.
Yeah.
And all of the iterations of those things. So what I wanted to do was to use the language and the lenses of the 7 oracles to look at the idols of what some of the potential idols are for us.
For us, yeah.
For me, not just us out there, but for me. And so next episode, I want to look at the idol and the best way to find out what your idols are, at least in the tribe of which you are a part, is to find out what you're allowed to question and what you're not allowed to question. And so the next episode I want to look at, because Rome had a very public story that Revelation called into question, I want to look at America's public story and see what bits of it Revelation may call into question. Is the quest for power infecting my church, now political power tied to a certain view of America?
Totally.
And the fact that I feel like I have to give about 1,000 disclaimers before I can have that conversation seems to suggest that maybe we should be paying attention to the story. I want to look at sexuality.
Yeah.
And I want to look at the assumptions that undergird our talking about sexuality, whether you're conservative or whether you're progressive. There are shared assumptions that I think Revelation would call into question. And I'm less interested in, well, what about this act or this orientation or this gender thing, and more about calling into question the assumptions that go into all those questions.
Right.
I think that's where Jesus, I don't think Jesus answers the question, should you be a Republican or Democrat? I think Jesus confronts the assumptions that lead us to those being the only two options.
Yeah, he's always answering 2-dimensional questions with 3-dimensional answers.
Boom. Exactly. So we're going to look at power politically. We're going to look at sexuality in some of the assumptions about what it is to be human. And then we're going to look at money in the way that the New Testament reconfigures poverty and riches.
Yeah.
And we're doing this through Revelation. This is how Revelation is relevant. It's not that these are eras of church history. It's that you can't read this and not look up and go, oh. And so I would want to be asking money, sex, and power questions if I lived in the Sudan, or if I lived in Nepal,
right,
or if I was a part of the Chinese church, right? This isn't about America. It's just where we live,
right,
that we have to ask the questions. So if I'm a missionary in Guatemala,
right,
I'm asking about Guatemala,
yeah,
right? If I'm in sub-Saharan Africa, I'm asking about sub-Saharan Africa.
Nature of that response or whatever. It's just that the discernment requires you to not take everything in 2-dimensional fashion, plug it in, and then be like, oh, well.
If revelation is to serve its function, it has to unveil. So in one sense, it unveils Jesus, right? And we're already beginning to see that. But in another sense, it also unveils the narratives that can compromise the church. And obviously, these are just 3 easy ones that are super sophisticated, but they're the things that the church is warring over right now.
Totally.
Political power, right?
You don't
Health
need much
wealth.
more than those things. We as humans, as we have evolved, and as technology has evolved, and as commerce has evolved, and as we've grown in population, these things, while they're rooted in the same thing, they've metamorphized, like they've changed over time, that we have to, in our time, really look at it and say, I don't know, it just requires so much more than just this cut and paste.
That's it.
Just like they didn't have Amazon.com back then and everything you could ever want at your fingertips. Well, that's a jokey example, but it gives there's nuance to being able to parse out, how do I fit into this? Or how do I,
Because here's what you're saying, Tim, and I love it. So for far too long, we have viewed the lens, we've looked at the Bible through the lens of Western culture.
Yes, 100%.
Now we want to look at Western culture through the lens of the Bible.
Oh.
And I know that sounds super cliche and cute and pithy.
No, but we've built on the first version. We've built our houses on that.
But that is deconstruction.
Yeah.
In its healthiest sense. Yeah. It's going, okay, how does a culture of hyper individualism, a culture of unprecedented affluence and access to goods and services and leisure time, and a culture that either has so shamed and stigmatized sex, or has moved to the other extreme and said it's actually not real and it's not important, but yet it's everywhere.
Right.
How do we be faithful into that culture? Revelation is designed to give us a set of lenses, and it's not just Revelation, it's the whole text of Scripture, but Revelation, you can't, I can't read the oracles and not say, okay, if Jesus were writing to my church,
right,
what would he be saying? And I don't think he would speak to my church in the way that he spoke to those. I think the stylized versions held certain symbolic power that they might not today.
Yeah, this letter would be confusing.
But they would be totally confusing. Hey, I will give you the morning star. We'd be like, sweet.
Morning star sausage?
Oh. Yeah, at that point, I'd be all in. If that's the hidden manna, I'm all in.
It's just tons of sausage.
So, over the next 3 episodes, as we use and bounce around in the oracles to say, okay, money, sex, and power, let's just ask questions. We're not going to arrive at anything, but part of the easy labeling of simplistic evangelicalism, that's not what's required here.
Yeah.
Is it sacred or secular? Is it Christian or non-Christian?
Mm-hmm.
Is it religious or irreligious? You're just like, those aren't the categories. Right. You know, totally. It's not. So I just want to practice.
Yeah. No, I love that.
And so we'll do money, sex, power, but we'll do it kind of through the text a little bit and just sort of see where, and I don't even know where this will go, but we're trying to cultivate 4 practices that are all over the book of Revelation that help discern. Yeah. So the first one is attentive listening and discerning engagement. So this is the hardest. Yeah. Revelation invites us to think that the story we're told isn't always the true story. Not in some conspiracy theory way, because there are a lot of Christians, like I just found out from my next door neighbor that mosquitoes have been engineered to give us a virus that makes us not want to eat meat because Bill Gates owns Impossible Burger. Yeah. And I first thought this person was kidding. And so I was like, yeah, dude, I got to watch Bill. I've not kept up with Bill Gates' shenanigans. And this person was not kidding.
Right.
I don't mean apocalyptic literature can be taken that way. Like, oh, here's like the QAnon of all QAnons, right? Revelation. That's why we get a lot of interest in the book, is it's the conspiracy theory. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about are the stories embedded in what's called normal in American culture,
right,
or Ugandan culture, or Swedish culture, right? The church at all times, at all places, is to engage in this attentive listening and discernment engagement. And that's discerning engagement. That's always been true of the church.
That's just huge. Because that example with the mosquitoes, comically, but it is true. Like, there is an amount of discernment that needs to be taken into, and the church, not the whole church, but a lot of the church has been swallowed up by things like QAnon, and it feeds the martyr syndrome, and
which blinds us
to the actual
things that are happening.
That makes so much sense with the false prophet, or with the powers as influencers or whatever. It's like, just give them a little nugget that puts them on a little bit of a stray course. Boom, done here. What's next? Like,
yep, exactly right. So a lot of Revelation can be used to feed conspiracy theory.
Totally. But I imagine most of the
'Cause
Bible, maybe specifically Revelation, but we've seen a lot of the Bible be used, perverted to do
all
that
sorts
same
of
thing.
things. You bet. You
I
bet.
can do all things.
So we're going to practice attentive listening and discerning
I like
engagement.
that.
The second thing is, in response, we then want to practice faithful witness and resistance. Nowhere are the churches in Revelation invited to be militant, or invited to seek power,
Yeah.
or invited to engage in culture war.
Uh-oh.
They are invited to inhabit and embody dynamics that embody the faithful witness of Jesus.
Yeah.
So, like nonviolent love and humility and forgiveness of enemies and willingness to be marginalized are all things that you see all over the place.
I like the word embody too versus like just profess.
Yes. One of the things that Revelation is going to call us to, which as Americans we're really going to struggle with, or at least I am, is Revelation puts doxology at the center of the battle. So there are 7 pieces of doxology, of worship, that are parody of the worship around us. So one scholar invites us into, he calls it liturgical patterns of life. And remember, worship in Hannah just said, I'm taking forever. Thank you, Hannah. The people need us. So,
I thought you said she
however
was saying
long
that
it
she's
takes.
taking forever.
No, she's saying in the Hannah font, which you do not need full words, capitals, or punctuation, you are taking forever. So there you go. If you want to know what life is like, is a highly respected
A prophet.
podcast professional. There it is.
What is it about your prophet in your own home?
Yes. Oh, it's so good. So like literally the next thing we're going to be doing after the 7 oracles is there's this big throne room scene for 2 chapters.
Oh, yeah.
That is all about doxology.
And I'm so curious about that. I've used that section, I know, out of context in church settings, and are you talking about like on the throne with the diamonds and the...
Totally. Yeah. Me too. But what Revelation paints is the antidote to the false stories.
Yeah.
Is this liturgical like recitation and pattern living of the true story. And so there's a lot to explore there. So the negative side is that we practice faithful witness and resistance. The positive side is that we embrace liturgical forms of living, which lead then into the cultivation, fourthly, of the missional hope of new creation.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That the only way we're able to allow ourselves to be marginalized or to forgive people or to love our enemies and not get even with them, the only way we can capably do that as human persons is to believe that the false promise of prominence or status or vengeance or vindication is hollow and will be replaced by something far better. I was going to try to say bigger and better. Far bigger and better and more wonderful that we call new creation.
Yeah.
And so we have to be in these church communities. We have to be discerningly engaged and attentively listening, and that calls us to faithful witness and resistance to the parts of culture that invite us out of new creation dynamics.
Yeah, because you're plugged in at the base level to the right thing. So then those things are natural. I would imagine are natural progressions from there.
That's right. And central. Yeah. Absolutely central to the new creation people, besides hope, is this like a doxological way of living.
Yeah, I'm really curious to get to those.
Yes. So that's our grid for engaging stories on money, sex, and power through the oracles.
You know what I was thinking about when you were talking about the church was I just had a long conversation with a friend, really good friend of mine that's in AA, and what AA has offered him in his understanding of what church is. And because when you think about it, like a lot of those things that you listed, like there's public shame to admitting that you're an alcoholic or an addict to anything. There's amount of public shame that comes with that. So there's a fear of acknowledgement or a fear of taking on that title. And then you come into this community that's literally built on, if you fall, we all stop and pick you up. If I fall, you all stop and pick me up. And that's a shared understanding. And then inside of that, there's a parsing out of identity that's from weakness first. And then there's all of these steps that go forward of how you reconcile community around you. So it's just really interesting. While you were going through all that letter, that the AA just kept ringing in my head, like over and over again, just how that structure is built to edify and reorient people who society has said no thanks.
That's right. That's good. And that's why when you experience AA, as one of my friends at church says, he said, we're the kind of people that are always welcome in the church basements, but never in the front doors.
Right?
Yeah. And I was like, dang.
Which has a lot of, that is a great metaphor. And there's not even a metaphor. It's a great truth.
Image.
But,
yeah.
Yeah.
So Tim, we got our work cut out, buddy.
Mm-hmm. It's exciting though.
Yeah.
It's very relevant and revelatory.
Well, that'd be a great name for a magazine. Relevant and revelatory. I've gone through this book a couple of times, and every time through it, it just is more and more powerful.
Well, that kind of makes sense to the overall idea too of just, it's a revelation. So what is it revealing to us with discernment now versus, you know what I mean? So it would make sense that this book continues to reveal as it is re-examined over time.
Yeah. Yes.
And then that's where it's missing the mark in the first place, is that we, like I was joking with the Amazon thing, but we're in such a different place. And while the root issues may be the same, the way in which we engage those has evolved over time. And so it requires a discernment to pick apart where am I in this? And how does this speak to me? And I imagine even if you read it 5 years ago, and then now that things have changed enough that it's going to reveal new things. It just shows the organic nature of our faith or our identity as Christians, that we have to be, it just doesn't, there's no finish line. It's always a pursuit and growing and growing and growing, which is what I love about it.
All right, friends. Well.
All right, Hannah.
I don't want a revelation. I want a revolution.
Other way around.
I want a revolution, not a revelation.
You want revolution. I want a revelation.
Okay, whatever it is. Until next time, friends. See ya.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. Voxology is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is supported by listeners just like yourself. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Voxology. You can also join the community and hang out and chat with us on the socials. Facebook.com/Voxology Podcast and on Instagram @Voxology. Thank you for walking the long road with us.